Outdoor Ball Strike Prevention Implementation e-Video, Summer 2022. Welcome to the SBCI Outdoor Ball Strike Prevention Implementation e-Video. This video is intended for school board administrators and staff requiring insight into the implementation of the Outdoor Ball Strike Prevention Toolkit. SBCI has a complete suite of supports to implement the toolkit, which include the Outdoor Ball Strike Toolkit, 5 interconnected strategies focused on reducing playground ball strike injuries, Implementation Tip Sheet, Implementation PPT, E-Module, 8 minutes, staff meeting focused, and this e-video. The video component is presented by Keith Wainwright, the principal of Glendew Public School in Whitby. Keith and the staff at Glendew undertook the initial pilot of the toolkit. Staff. Provincially in 2018-19, 29% of all head injuries, concussions in Ontario school boards were the result of a ball strike. 56% of these incidents occurred outside of the school, in the playfields and tarmac. Students. From January 2009 through May 2022, the Ontario School Boards Insurance Exchange, OSBIE, reports that membership-wide, 14% of all student injuries resulted from ball play during recess, free play, or recess sport. Summary. Whether staff or student, the incidence and severity of outdoor ball strikes is a safety concern. In particular, are the head injuries that can result from a ball strike, including concussions. The Outdoor Ball Strike Prevention Toolkit, based in large part on research conducted by Parachute Canada, is composed of 5 interconnected prevention elements. 1. Create physical activity zones. 2. Playground mapping. 3. Teaching positive playground expectations. Students need to know what is expected of them during recess. 4. Active supervision. Staff are supported in their role and understand their role, including the techniques of active supervision. 5. Supervisor gear such as a whistle or other signaling device.
So Gary kind of approached me about this. Gary and I've worked on things for some time, and we've talked and done other little projects in the past, and has been great. This was near and dear to us because we started looking at it, and this happened. Sometimes things all kind of come together in your world. And at our school, I had my staff coming to me and saying, look, we're really concerned about some of the things that are happening here. What can we do about it? And at the same time, Gary and I started talking about it, and it kind of all came together. So it was lovely that it was really teacher driven to a large extent as to what we have a concern, an organic concern, what can we do to make it work? And that was kind of our fundamental starting spot to this. And if I could just have the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of background here. It was, and again, there's a lot of text there, but we needed to, this was before COVID even started, we needed to take a look at this and say, what are the things that we can do to decrease ball strikes on teachers and on students, and kind of keep the place a safe place for everybody. And we there's a knee-jerk reaction that you might want to do as a principal, which is, that's it, no balls playing, nobody play at all. And then you recognize that that's never going to work. It's not good for kids. It's not good for anybody. And so how are you going to keep it, not so there's no balls around, but how do you keep it ball safe? And it initially started, as Gary said, pre-COVID, but then we then during COVID had to cohort kids, and the whole thing fell apart. But as soon as we were active in the background saying, when this is over, this is what we're going to do. When this is over, this is what we're going to do. We pulled everyone back in. And when we were actually able to get back in an uncohorted environment, we were able to implement that. So it was probably the longest PD session for staff, like a year and a half of this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. And then suddenly it all kind of rolled out. So let's talk a little bit about the implementation. The first thing was we spent a lot of time doing some fact finding and getting the data from our teachers and our lunchroom supervisors and our educational assistants and my secretary and my custodian. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. We sat down and said, where are people getting hurt and how are you getting hurt? Where are the places where we're seeing this type of thing happening? And I'm really thankful that I didn't just talk to the teachers. I talked to the lunchroom supervisors. I talked to the ice giver outer of the school, which is your secretary, who is probably your best person for data collection. All you have to do is say, where did you get hurt? And she would kind of talk to me. And we all kind of put all this together and kind of came out with a bit of a needs analysis. Now, the diagram you see there is our school. That's Glendew Public School, a fairly busy street in front of us, Fallingbrook. And we've got behind us a swamp. That's where are the gators, which a wetland. And we also have beyond that a busier road. So we're kind of this oasis in the middle of everything. We're really blessed in that we have this beautiful piece of land that we can work on, but the tarmac area is actually relatively small compared to the land around us. So we end up with a lot of tarmac play areas where we were getting ball collisions. And when we thank you, we sat down then at the staff meeting and had a discussion. It was a series of a couple of them. And we said, okay, this is what I'm seeing. We put up all the data, put it all on a big PowerPoint and just had big honks of pieces of paper and said, what are the needs? What can we do to make this work? And the collective minds of my staff are way better than the mind of me. And they came up with a lot of ideas. One of the solutions when we were looking at all of this, if you want to flip to the next slide for this. We sat down and we made a map. And the first map we made, as Gary said, we just drew it out on big sheets of paper and collectively said, what are the things that we need to do? And there were two competing interests that the staff were really concerned about. The first one was, how do you keep kids engaged so that they're not kind of physically fighting, so they're not in each other's space, so that they're not just standing there, because that's not, I mean, standing there and talking is one thing, but standing there mindlessly is something else. And at the same time, how do you do that? So you want to kind of engage the kids, but you want to do it in a safe way that is manageable from a supervision side, because the second half of this is there's only so many bodies to go around. And how are we going to kind of work this out? So I'm a bit of a science geek, and we started talking about student kinetic energy zones, and it's how fast is the kid running, and what are they doing while they're being active. And we mapped it out. Then I said, really, with some great help from my phys ed teacher, I said, what are the things that we're doing on the yards? What are the things that engage the kids, and what are compatible and incompatible activities that they can be doing? And wall ball, of course, was one zone that came up. Basketball was a zone, football, soccer zones. The kids, especially for the little kids, literally kids running around. And that was kind of those areas. You don't want to mix, for instance, wall ball and basketball, not compatible. On the other hand, a walking zone, a reading zone, a talking zone, those low energy zones are really quite good. And if you take a look at that picture is safely taken off of, actually, I'm not quite ready, just back one more. Yeah, that picture taken safely from the roof. I'm just telling you that we were all, that it looks like we were perched over the edge. We weren't, it's okay. If you take a look, you can see this is kind of the outcome of part of our mapping, which looks so neat compared to what was on paper. But you can see a couple of things. You can see the basketball zone marked off with the free throw line, and you also have the 3-point lines. And that kind of was not an uncommon thing. What we added was that red hatch mark, and I'll come back to that in a bit. So that's what you're seeing there. And then off to the right of that, you can't see it, but where that dirt is, just to the right of that, there's a outdoor garden space with seats and so forth. So that's like the low energy zone. And you can see in the foreground a 4 square marked area that turns out to be the most popular game for all grades, bar none. And then we have a couple of other play zone types things in that area. So that was kind of the concepts of the mapping, how that all played out. And because the teachers were involved from the start, they had the concepts of what we're going to look at and what we're going to do. And it made the supervision, which we'll come back to in a moment, a little bit easier. Okay, can we just take a look at the next slide? So once we figured out what the needs were, what we wanted to do, and where those zones were going to actually be on our play areas, we then took some time to talk to the staff. And again, when I say staff, it's not just the teachers, it's the EA educational assistants, the early childhood educators, it's our lunchroom supervisors, it is our obviously our teachers, and any other staff that are in the area. So they kind of, everyone knows what the games and the zones are. We took the time then to teach the kids how to play the various games. And when it wasn't enough to actually put them out on the tarmac and say, now go play. For instance, in the foreground, again, you can see those squares. That's a game called Foursquare. Most people know there's kind of one common game you'll get for Foursquare where you bounce the ball up, and if you miss the ball, you're out and you line up and you go through it. But there's about a dozen different games all played on that same tarmac. So although it looks very simple, you can have games that will engage kids from kindergarten all the way up to grade 8, all in that one area. What it's very helpful to do is make sure your teachers know what's going on with that. So when the teachers are out there playing and there's a disagreement over the rules, you can talk about the rules and what are the rules and make sure that everybody's following them. We also made sure that, just as a matter of interest and probably really important that people talk about, if you're having this happening in your schools, principals, sometimes we can be action oriented, just want to get it done. And there's a temptation to want to walk out there with your own paint and just start painting things on the tarmac on your own. I would if you're going to roll this type of thing out, it's really important that people involve facility service and follow the board protocols. I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but it's important that you're using the right paint, that you're actually following the other rules, that you're not doing things that are going to actually cause more injuries. So when you're going through this, please make sure that the principals take the time to talk to the health and safety and facility service people at the board office, so you're not just kind of making things worse by putting paints down that don't belong there and that type of thing. Just as a matter of interest, do you think little grade 1s will lick the paint? They will lick the paint. If you don't think they will, they will. So we then, after having gone through the zones, having put down consulted with the board office, having put down the signs, having educated the staff about what's going on, we had a pandemic, came out of the pandemic, then showed the kids how to play together. We then moved on to working with the staff on actually implementing on a day-to-day basis. And this photo shows you, for instance, the intermediate zone. We break it up also by, because we're so large, we can do it primary, junior, intermediate. I have other schools which just do it by kinetic energy. It depends on the size of your staff and the size of your school. But you can see in the foreground there, the red hatch marks up against the rather large wall. That was a decision made by the teachers that was going to be our wall ball zone. Behind us is kind of a parking space, but that was the safe spot we could do that. And the balls, remember I mentioned how important it was to talk to our custodian? That is the place we play wall ball, because if you go a little bit, they used to play it a little bit to the right there, where you can see the yellow poles, see the low hanging roof there. He spent a disproportionate amount of time going up onto the roof and retrieving balls from that spot. And when we asked the kids, and that was another group we did talk to, why are you playing here? And you can see that there's a little discoloration still on the wall from before. They said, well, we like to play there because when the ball goes ricocheting behind us, it doesn't go out into the parking lot. So we said, oh, well, what happens if we put up a little barrier so that it doesn't go out into the parking lot? And they said, okay, we can do that. And then we're able to put the wall ball area to the left and kept it away from the kids who were in the, so the, you can't see it, but a little bit off to the right is a low energy zone. So we, again, we're separating the high energy zone from the low energy zone around wall ball. So when we talk about that implementation, again, it's not enough just to talk to your teachers. You do need to talk to your lunchroom supervisors because they're out at lunch and they're the ones who are seeing what's going on and making sure that everybody gets involved in knowing the rules. So if you take a look at the next slide, I'll show you kind of what the pattern looked like at the end to give you some ideas of how these areas literally played out. We had, I'm going to start at the top and go clockwise around. You can see that we put that hatch mark area, the red mark area is a don't sit in there zone. It seems like a really nice place, especially in the winter. Kids might want to sit there and play. They can't. That was for a junior yard to play their wall ball. I know it's close to a window, but it turned out okay. The red hatch marks mean do not sit here, do not stand here. The yellow marking was our concept of the trail that you could walk around and have an area that you would be safe to walk through. This was a good idea. However, we've discovered that if you're only going to do one thing, put down the red hatch marks. The trail's not as important, but having the red down there lets people know where it's safe to walk and where it's not safe to walk. Again, so on going clockwise, you can see we put down a walking track. Remember, I talked about various areas of kinetic energy. We put a walking track down there, and that gets used more often than you might think by people saying, especially when we're doing daily physical activity, DPA, you get the student who just doesn't want to take part in things, and it's just go walk the track. And they can walk and they just talk with their buddies, and it's a kind of a controlled zone, a controlled area that they can actually walk in and get their steps in and just have a little bit of communal talking time. And that actually turned out really well. At the bottom, we added that as another game area. It looks like a hockey. It can be used for mini sticks with proper eyewear. It can be used for mini soccer with our primary kids. They use that especially on days when the field is so muddy you can't really get out there. They enjoy playing that. We put that the point behind that area and put that picture in the slide is when you're putting down games, please make sure that they are games that have multi-purposes. If you put down a game that is too specified, that this is the game and this is the rules, you'll find you don't get a lot of use out of it. But if you have a game that has multiple uses, you'll find that you'll get more bang for the buck. That's just kind of a cost thing. And then at the last slide, obviously, is our basketball area with the basketball nets. You can see the zone, the red zone. Now, I'd like to say, where you choose to put that red zone, we were really highly scientific on the way that we decided how far out the ball strike area would be. I took a basketball and threw it as hard as I could at the net and saw where it was landing, and we decided that if it was landing at foot height or below, that was going to be the area that was going to be, and then we measured it out. It was not really scientific at all. We just threw the ball up to see how far it would land, and that's where the red zones got set. And so that was kind of our background for that. Which takes me to the next bit on active supervision. This is probably one of the, so we talked about the physical side of things. We talked about kind of the why, the how, and this bit here is probably one of the most important things you can talk to your staff about. Active supervision is really about situational awareness. It's being in the moment, it's being with your kids. And there is that tendency for all of us to be out and you've had a bit of a morning and you want to talk to your peers, but really it's being engaged with no distractions in paying attention to what's happening with the students on the yard. When you say active supervision, it doesn't just mean walking around. It doesn't just mean concentrating. Active supervision is a thing on its own. And if you go look that up, there are certain components to good active supervision that will affect whether or not you have positive or negative interactions between students and staff and students and students. It's important that there's an active scanning, that your head's up and you're walking. And I talked about this with my staff, and I've been doing this at a couple of other schools before this. It is being engaged and looking for appropriate behaviors as well as inappropriate behaviors. And when you're doing this, there's a need, there's sometimes a tendency to just look at the things that kids are doing wrong, but you need to also compliment the kids that are doing things right, because students will tend to do things that are wrong just to get attention sometimes, and that's really unfortunate. There's a randomness in your circulation. If you're very predictive as to where you're going, if you're just doing loops around one after another, what'll happen is you'll get the students that are kind of following around, and you're walking one way and they're walking another, and they're avoiding you. That randomness in the way you're circulating is important. With more visits to more areas of concern. And remember, I talked about the mapping originally. One of the areas we identified was where are the hotspots? Where are we going to make sure we do that supervision? And some of those hotspots are the areas that are very active, and some of those areas that are hotspots are not very active. And we want to make sure that we cover off of those, and we name it. It's not just kind of a hunch. It's named. This is the area you need to cover these areas when you're actually looking at. When you have an interaction with a child over anything, you're going to have, you should have more positive interactions than negative interactions when you're on duty. Those interactions need to be conversations. They need to be talks. They need to be not just, hey, stop that. It needs to be a conversation, even with the littlest of the littles, about what's okay and not. If you give conversation saying, I can see that you're about to have a disagreement. If you can kind of front load what the expectations are, you tend to have less issues after. So you have lots of reminders of the expectations. And if something does go wrong, it's simply a case of going back then to what we've already talked about. So they're not in that moment getting in trouble for something they don't particularly know about. The positive interactions, what are you doing? How was your day? What did you do on the weekend? Are actually more important than some of the other stopping of activities, believe it or not. If you have a group of kids that are all together and they're kind of noisy and jostling, if you go into that group and have that conversation, 9 times out of 10, that what could have turned into something raucous and will go the right way as opposed to the wrong way. And if you want to know about how did we know about the areas and what activities you want to do, we talk to the kids. And this is how we collect that data, and we continue to do so. When issues are spotted, jumping down to F, we have a routine, which is stop the behavior, name the behavior so they know what they've done, correct the behavior, get compliance, and move on. Each of those are short and positive. The time between the starting an interaction and ending the interaction should be no more than about 15 seconds. That's it. And then move on. And if they're still doing that, you come back. If it's a big issue, then we follow what within our board is called progressive discipline. And some of that gets referred to the office. Some of that gets referred to the classroom teacher. But the number of small corrective behaviors that you can get in and involve yourself in will have a huge effect later on by having less of the big behaviors. And the last but not least on that, and I'm kind of going through this because I don't want to go on too long here, is the follow-up. In anything that happens within the school, I cannot stress enough the importance of that follow-up with the staff. What happened? How can we avoid it? What can we do different next time? If you take the time at staff meetings, which we do, to have that health and safety component each staff meeting, and have time to talk about it, you'll pick up more things about what needs to be done to adapt the program, and we can identify routines and modify them as needed. For instance, we have been doing the active supervision, of course, all year. Coming out of the pandemic, we had a plan. We're going to go with the primary yard, the junior yard, the intermediate yard. We had a couple of talks at staff meetings, and they said, yeah, this isn't working because the juniors and the intermediates are interacting, in ways they shouldn't be. So we flipped the primary and the junior yards, which gave the primary students the sandbox, otherwise known as the jumping pit, and the juniors a larger yard to play in, which made them happy. And the only reason we did that was based on what staff were saying. So please make sure that when talking to your principals, it's that adaptive model as you're going. Similar to that, and Gary talked about it, for the active supervision is having the kit. It's funny, in the background you can see my lovely orange vest. And I think I'm blurred out, so I don't know if you're actually going to see it. If I could just remind people, one of the things we have in every one of our vests, we have a whistle given out to every staff member to make sure that they can draw the attention of staff and students if something's going wrong. I had, and these are still left over, I have my bag of masks, my bag of Band-Aids, and my sterilization kit for when we were doing pandemic stuff. Still haven't taken that out. And the orange vest is there. People say, why are you wearing the orange vest? For that reason, so that the kids know that you're a safe person. And it really matters that they have been trained for you. Lunchroom supervisors, administrators, teachers, we all have the identical vest so that everybody knows who to go to and what to talk about if there's an issue. So I'm ready for my last slide, penultimate slide. One of the things we talked about is that feedback and studying the effectiveness of the program. We are doing a little bit of a study, and Gary and I, at the end of the year, will be sharing it with Gary and hopefully give you more data on that. When we are doing this, I'm going to have to take off my blur in the background, so you're about to see my horrible, messy room behind me. If I hit apply, there we go. It's a messy room. This is our. I know this looks stupid, but this actually works. This is our data collection. See, it's really simple. But every single time a student gets hit in the head, we actually have the secretary is the one who's doing this, a chart to say, okay, how are we doing? And I've got a friend who's in a school matched for size of school, demographics are very, very similar. And she's doing the exact same thing at her school, just to see, has this been effective? We're getting about half the number of ball strikes, just so you know, from her school to my school. So just anecdotally, more than anything else, said, is it working? Based on what we're seeing, yeah, it is. It's kind of, I think we need some better year-over-year data, but I think as we go through this and reassess it and kind of adapt, as I said, location, that type of thing, we're getting better each time we go through this. I would strongly recommend that all administrators do take that time to just have the conversation, not information just coming from me, the administrator, to the staff, but coming the other way in the staff meeting. What are those concerns in the conversation about things like ball safety and student safety and staff safety out on the yard? Because I think it's been a very good process. Finally, the whole thing, I'm just going to put the back out to my staff and how much I appreciate them. The process would not have worked, and the effect that we've had and the decrease in injuries we wouldn't have had if we didn't actually approach this from the start as a collective, as a discussion item from everybody. It's not a quick fix. I would love to have a blank sheet in front of you to show you absolutely no ball strikes. That's not where it is, but we're moving that way. I would encourage other people to kind of try the toolkit out and kind of see if it helps you, because I know it certainly helped us. So that's kind of the end of the little presentation I had. I know I kind of went through it fairly quickly, but I'm open to questions for me and Gary if you have anything else. Thank you.
Remember, safety is a shared responsibility. Thank you for playing your part. Questions? Please talk to your supervisor and/or principal. Acknowledgement. SBCI would like to acknowledge administrators Keith Wainwright and Melanie Proden and staff at the Glendew Public School in Whitby, Ontario, for their many contributions in the development and implementation of this prevention tool. Thank you, Gators! Thank you.